Love-inspired suspense and HarlequinAudio present Hiding the Witness by Deena Alexander. Performed by Alexis Fandom. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Psalms 23:4. This book is lovingly dedicated to Greg, Elena, Steve, Nikki, and Logan. You are my greatest blessings. Chapter 1. Diana Cameron knew better than to drive while exhausted, especially on the winding mountain road that led to the isolated log cabin she called home. But tonight, she was doing it anyway. She cracked the window, filling the Jeep with the scent of crisp autumn air, fallen leaves, and the coming storm. The scenery, an entire mountain speckled with the vibrant orange, red, and gold hues of fall, would have kept her awake if it wasn't 3 o'clock in the morning and pitch black. Even the moonlight couldn't force its way through the thick cloud cover that heralded the coming storm, which was one of the reasons she decided to head home rather than stay at the firehouse when her shift had ended. That, and the indescribable urge nudging her home, a voice she learned a long time ago to heed. Plus, the last thing she wanted was to stay at the firehouse and have to explain to her fellow firefighters the screams that so often preceded her waking. She needed a good night's sleep in her own bed. Hopefully, without the nightmares that so often plagued her. Though she doubted that would be the case. Home. Even after 4 years living in the mountains of upstate New York, as far as she could get from the mild climate and palm trees she'd grown up with in Central Florida, it still sometimes felt surreal to call the area home. When she'd fled Orlando 4 years ago, after the one man she should have been able to trust had betrayed her, she'd harbored doubts she'd ever be able to find somewhere to call home again. She'd never expected the sense of camaraderie and kinship she'd found at the Shady Creek Fire Department. She shifted, uncomfortable with, but not surprised at, the direction her thoughts had wandered. Memories often crept in during the darkest hours, when exhaustion left her vulnerable, when she didn't have the strength to battle the pain, the betrayal, the heartache, the fear. Liam Barlow had been her fiancé, her hero, her everything, her perfect match, or so she'd thought. How could she have made such a terrible mistake? How had she missed the signs when she'd been trained to see them, had volunteered to work with abused women at the local shelter? Was that what had driven her to help people, to protect those who were in danger, to become a firefighter as Liam had been, to atone for his sins committed in her name? Did it still drive her to do more? Would it ever be enough? No, probably not. Not when she'd failed to recognize her own reflection mirrored in the dead eyes of the women she'd tried to help before her fiancé. No, she refused to think of him in that way anymore. He was the criminal who would spend the rest of his life in prison for burning down that women's shelter. Not that a lifetime of incarceration could pay for all the lives he stole that day in a fit of selfish rage. Tears shimmered in her eyes, blurring the already dangerous road. Diana swiped the tears from her cheeks. They were not for Liam. She'd never shed a single tear for him, nor would she. But for all the people he'd killed just to take something she loved away from her. Something that stole her attention from him, that took her from his side when he wanted her there to lift him up, to help him attain his goals. Well, at least she could rest comfortably, knowing he'd spend the rest of his life locked behind bars, where he couldn't hurt anyone else. Unless you counted the thoughts of him that taunted her every time she hovered near sleep. Lightning sizzled across the clouds, then struck too close, raising goosebumps. A massive peal of thunder followed on its heels. At this rate, she'd count her blessings if she could get even a few hours of sleep. Just enough so it wouldn't feel like sandpaper scraping over her eyes every time she blinked tomorrow. Drier than usual conditions, a mountain full of fallen leaves and brush and a lightning storm. Talk about a recipe for disaster. Gravel
Sample complete. Ready to continue?